All right. I appreciate everybody joining us today for the South Central Chapter AAAE Conversation with Colleagues. Our conversation today is with your regulatory and grant funding agencies. So I'm Craig Phipps with KSA Engineers. I am the Aviation Practice Director for our Aviation Engineering, Planning, and Architectural Services. I'm honored to be able to moderate this session of Conversations with Colleagues. We have an esteemed panel of state aviation officials who are excited to discuss a variety of topics that impact the aviation industry in the Southwest region of the FAA and across the nation. I want to thank the South Central Chapter for hosting this conversation. As a 30-year member of the aviation community and a 20-year member of the chapter, I appreciate their efforts to advance the aviation and the aviation profession. I see from our attendee list, we've got a great mix of airport professionals, state aviation officials, and consultants. So it brings to mind Mr. Carl Newman in a statement that he made while chairman of AAAE about the partnering relationships of our groups. And I think these conversations hosted by the chapters are a great example of that. So just a couple of housekeeping items. First, if you would please mute yourself to cut down on any background noise. And second, we have a pretty large group of participants. And so in terms of questions and comments, we're going to handle that through the chat function. My esteemed colleague, Peter Van Pelt, Mr. PVP, will be monitoring the chat and bring any questions and comments forward. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panel. I'll start with Ms. Jane Lacerio first and never least. She is the Planning and Programming Manager for the New Mexico Department of Transportation Aviation Division. Jane has served the aviation division in many capacities throughout her career, including as acting director and airport development administrator. Prior to joining the division, Jane served as the associate director of operations and planning at the Albuquerque International Sunport. Jane holds a BSET from New Mexico State University and a MCRP from the University of New Mexico. She is a certified planner through the American Planning Association and is an accredited executive with the American Association of Airport Executives. Also joining us is Mr. Jim Halley. Jim is the Airport Planning and Programming Director for TxDOT Aviation. In this role, he leads a team of outstanding aviation professionals responsible for the development of TxDOT Aviation's capital improvement program, airport coordination, project development, and environmental reviews, land acquisition, and planning studies. Prior to joining TxDOT, Jim was the statewide planning coordinator with the Florida DOT Office of Policy Planning, where he was involved in the update to the Florida State Transportation Plan, as well as statewide public and partner involvement and outreach. Jim spent 8 years as a U.S. Marine Special Operations Team Leader and Artillery Officer. He received his BS in Aviation Management from Florida Tech and his MBA in Aviation from Embry-Riddle. Also joining us is Grayson Ardes. Grayson is the director of the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission. The commission is a state agency in charge of promoting aviation and airspace throughout the state, including the 108 public airports that comprise Oklahoma's air transportation system. Grayson's emphasis on promoting the airspace industry, the state's second largest industry, planning and development of the state's air transportation system, and encouraging public-private partnerships to enhance the aerospace industry and support workforce development. Grayson graduated from the University of Oklahoma with a degree in aviation management with minors in business administration and air traffic control. And finally, Mr. Bradley Brandt is the aviation director for the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development Office of Multimodal Commerce Aviation Division. Brad is a graduate of Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University with a degree in aviation management and a master's degree in aeronautics. Additionally, he earned an aviation law diploma from the International Air Transportation Association. Brad began his aviation career in airport operations at the Denver International Airport. He joined the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development's Aviation Division in 2001. Currently, he serves the aviation community in Louisiana as the aviation director for the DOTD. He serves with a staff of 11, administering a $1.3 million operations budget and a $28.5 million capital outlay budget. Brad has served as a member of the National Association of State Aviation Officials, where he held numerous positions with the organization. So with that, I might just kick it over to the panel and see if they have an opening remark. Is there maybe a particular topic that y'all would think would be great to cover with this group today? Jane, anything that you would like to add?
I just want to say hello to all my South Central chapter friends and colleagues. Craig, thank you so much for organizing this. I know we're all excited to be with you and everyone today. And I think Craig has prepared quite a list of questions for all of us to answer. So I will pass it on to my cohorts, Brad or Grayson, to see if they have anything to add.
How about you, Grayson?
We're going to talk about funding here, Craig. Maybe just a little bit. So I think that's the hot button topic on everybody's minds today, whether it's the dedicated funding, the competitive funding, funding at the state levels from ARPA monies that the states have been able to receive that are not aviation related. So I know that's the hot topic right now in Oklahoma, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that later. But looking forward to the conversation, and thanks for inviting me to participate.
Thank you, Grayson. Brad, do you have anything additional you'd like to add?
No, just thank you and appreciate the opportunity to participate today. And I echo Jane and Grayson's comments on the funding aspect, and looking forward to a good conversation on that today. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And Jim, anything from you?
I just want to say, thanks to Craig for setting this up and the other panelists. I think us all getting on with the airports and the other partners, the consultants throughout our region, to hear our message is going to be really important in all of us helping you guys at the more tactical level, really implement some great projects with what we have coming up in the next few years. And for the record, was it recording when you called me esteemed, Craig?
It was, absolutely.
Is that on record? So, okay. All right. I'd like to request that.
And I can say it again. I'm happy to do that.
No.
Well, with that, we'll go ahead and get kicked off. I have prepared some questions, and to Grayson's point, you know what, we're going to lead off with funding. My question was more specific to the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the bipartisan infrastructure law, but we certainly can talk about other pots of money as well. So Jim, I'm going to throw this out to you to start with, since you're the lone block grant state. And so can you look into your crystal ball, and what do you see in terms of issuing of grants under IIJA?
So that absolutely, definitely can start this off, Craig. I think the most important thing we need to keep in mind, and what my crystal ball is telling me, is we need to be patient. This is the fourth enormous new chunk of money that the FAA has received essentially in the last 2 years. That is not an easy thing for them to do. I know we're all, even us as a block grant state, we're chomping at the bit to get that money put at our airports. The individual airports want that money, but reality is if we work with our partners at the FAA to make sure that we're setting this up in the right way, it's going to be more beneficial to us over the next 5 years, the length of this program. So really making sure that us collectively as an industry, states, airports, consultants, show a little bit of that ability to let the FAA work through exactly how they're going to implement this, so we get the right guidance, is going to be key in really showing that patience. Obviously, I think that the funding and what's eligible and what it's going to mean for the airports and the 3 different programs, the allocations, the terminals, and the tower programs, in the state of Texas, is really going to allow a lot of infrastructure investment that we as a state system have had to put off for the last 5, 10, 20 years. And I see Dave Fulton's on. I'm sure he's very, very aware of this as well. It's going to be able to move a lot of these things that, not that they weren't high priority, but they just fell out of the program, fell out of the CIP, because we could essentially spend every dime we have on pavement. It's going to give us and our airports and the entire system the ability to put some investment, some public investment in some of these projects that we just haven't had the financial feasibility to fund in the past. And again, that's why I think it's really important for us to be working with our partners at the FAA on the actual implementation and developing that, because we want to make sure that that guidance and that structure is done right from the beginning, so that way we can really hit some home runs in the next 5 years. And that's really what we're focusing on in Texas as a block grant state, is continuing to work with our federal partners, with our individual airports, and making sure that we're all getting our ducks in a row, for lack of a better term, on the front end to make the implementation as successful as we can throughout the entire life of the program. So.
Okay.
Hey, Craig, before we go on, let's remind our people who are viewing today that we will be pushing through their questions live. So on any of these topics, if you have follow-ons while our presenters are presenting, we'll get you in the queue, and then we will take general questions afterwards. But if you have something that comes to mind with regard to the topic at hand, get it in there and we'll get it out to the panelists.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I appreciate the reminder on that, and thank you to the esteemed Jim Halley for that response. And so, and what I heard was, I didn't hear a specific date on when grants would start rolling out, but I did hear have patience. You know, this is ramping up. The implementation of this is coming. And so I'll throw it out to the other panel members. Is there anything to add? I know Texas is a block grant state. Anything different from New Mexico, Oklahoma, Arkansas? I'm sorry. Apologies.
I think from Oklahoma, the patience key that Jim had mentioned was pretty good. We've told people, I know FAA is asking for CIPs yesterday, and please get this to us so we can program these funds. But we're trying to take the long game approach. We just don't know, is this 5 years of money? Is this going to continue after the 5 years, or is this just a one-time 5-year opportunity? I know there's discussions being had in the next FAA reauthorization debate about upping some of the entitlements and upping some of the levels of directed, dedicated funding to aviation, but we just don't know. So let's make a measure twice, cut once approach on CIPs and what projects need to happen in Oklahoma, and kind of be methodical, because we know the needs are there. We know the needs far outweigh the revenues that are coming in. And at the end of the day, if we can do something that's kind of transformational and foundational for an airport that may not happen till year 3 or 4 of the BIL program, let's do it, as opposed to doing a small project today and get something out the door just so we can check that box and say it's been done. So we are also taking the long game in Oklahoma. Of course, we'd love to have our projects each year out sooner, but you know, we also live within a political realm too, of Congress appropriating dollars on a regular basis. And to be honest with you, probably the most exciting thing is BIL money not being a part of that political appropriations process and being able to apply for grants at any time of the year. I'm really kind of excited to see how that's going to play into the realm of possibilities and what we can do with that money.
Very good. Jane or Brad?
Well, since I hit unmute first, like Oklahoma and Texas, we are also playing the waiting game. What I find interesting within our ADO, and I don't know, Brad, if you're noticing this as well, but we're currently opening bids right now, which are coming in significantly higher than what any of us have anticipated. And we're starting to get pushed to, or airports are getting pushed to, well, just use your bill money to make up the difference. Just use the bill money to make up the difference. We, like Oklahoma and Texas, want to see the bill money be used for what the airport needs, not as a making up the difference within bids. So I don't know if any other states have had issues with that, but that's what we're really being pushed to do, is to use it for bids that come in over.
Yeah, Jane, here in Louisiana, we're seeing the exact same thing. You know, of course, we live in the same ADO within the region, but yeah, well, our airports are also taking bids on, you know, very important projects, and those that are coming over that the state of Louisiana cannot, you know, jump in and handle immediately. You know, our airports are also being pushed to look at that entitlement money through bill and either push their project altogether or try and find a way to use that, you know, that supplemental funding to supplement that. The interesting thing in Louisiana with regard to bill, and I agree with all of my my counterparts in the other states, you know, as far as the waiting game and taking kind of a more of a patient wait and see approach to allow that airport to kind of develop their CIPs and add to it. Because outside of that, you know, you're just taking the next project on the list and moving it up. And I think to Jane's point, what we would really like to see in Louisiana, what we're working with our airports on here, is not only that next inline project, but what is the next available best development, you know, for commerce related type stuff, because, you know, the bill IIJA stuff has a little bit more flexibility built into it than, you know, the normal AIP process. Specific to our program here in Louisiana, where we're really feeling the pinch is when the bill came out, and was really started to be talked about and moved in December. We start planning for our next year's program in November of every year, and our program has to go to our state legislature by February. So by the time we got to that point, we had no idea, no way of planning for specific projects, because in Louisiana, we essentially take care of the full 10% match, or whatever that match requirement may be, for our NIPIAS airports here. So being able to identify any kind of specific investment projects or whatever was very, very difficult for us. So we found a way around it, found a loophole essentially within our requirements to be able to capture the match and the forecasted amount that our airports would get, from IIJ, not with this fiscal year, but over the next 4 years, with the full 5-year implementation being in place. But that's not going to be a sustainable model for us and for the way we run our program. Just something of interest as far as how our program runs.
Very good. I appreciate all of those comments. Peter, is there anything on the chat as a follow-up to this topic?
Nothing yet, Craig.
All right, very good. Well, I think that the next question kind of dovetails with the responses that we received as related to BIL being eligible for some of those types of projects that wouldn't normally be safety and maintenance, as well as the rising cost of construction that we're seeing. So Grayson, I'm going to ask you to start this one. Almost universally, airport operators are in need of affordable hangar space. But many times the cost of developing such facilities costs more to construct than the markets are willing to pay. Do you have a statewide programs to help airports bridge the cost gap of construction? If yes, could you please tell us about it? And if not, are there some programs that y'all are considering?
Certainly, Craig. I'm kind of glad we're virtual here, because I'm probably going to say some things that maybe a few aviators might not be too happy about. But being an aviator myself, I feel I can kind of get away with it because I too want to own an airplane here in the near future, and we'll have to be basing that airplane at a general aviation airport in Oklahoma. We have had the luxury of the last 2 years of the state legislature in Oklahoma providing us some money to develop a vertical construction program. We are putting that money into hangars either via grant or loan, depending on which the sponsor decides to choose upon. And of course, we've had a pretty competitive list of requests. Last year when we submitted our asks, we got 24 submittals back to us, and we're only able to get to 6 of those. And of course, we just sent out another ask yesterday to see if airports wanted to participate. But Craig, I'm going to take an issue a little bit with your affordable hangar space. Let me tell you, you're not going to find any more affordable hangar space or any more affordable space than hangars at some of our GA airports across the country. And I think this is something we're all going to have to come to the realization as costs increase, as operational costs go up. Right now, and for years, aviation's been subsidized. We maintain airports, we maintain pavement, and having a T hangar that may charge 65 or 100 or even $150 a month, given the amenities of that airport, it may be a 5,000-foot runway. It may have an instrument approach to both runway ends. It may have fuel, may have AWAS. All that costs money, and I can point to a multitude of airports in the state of Oklahoma that have not increased rates in the last probably 5 or 10 years. In fact, I won't say the name of the airport, but we were just at an airport the other day that had a new set of T hangars built within the last couple of years, bifold doors, $150 a month. That might be the sweetest deal in town right there. And so I think one of the things that we're having to check and see in Oklahoma is how can we better partner with our airports that really truly want to ensure a revenue policy that allows them to be able to be self-sustaining in the long term. We all know that's a grant assurance for the federal grant program, as well as a grant assurance for the OAC state grant program. And so we just want to make sure that, and again, it's a tough conversation. In fact, I know you guys are having some of those tough conversations with a couple of your clients in Oklahoma right now. But I think as a totality of aviation, as we get to this conversation about, well, general aviation might be shrinking a little bit, but business aviation is expanding. How long can we continue to subsidize? And I'm not saying that we have to answer that or come up with a solution today, but what is the solution long term? Because we're going to have to figure it out as a whole to be able to see some of these vertical infrastructure improvements continue. Because if we're just looking for a handout and a subsidy, that's going to be a really tough struggle for a lot of non-aviators to understand when we go make those asks.
Greg, let me jump in here a second if I can. I'm going to raise my hand and say I was the guy who added the term affordable.
Yeah.
And what I meant in terms of affordable was that if you take a look, I mean, some places, 10-unit T hangars, all infrastructure and ramp, you're the better part of $1 million. You put a reasonable cap rate on that, expect to get your payout in 10 or 12 years, you're looking at $700-800 a T hanger in many instances. And I'm saying the market won't bear $700 or $800 for T hangers, was all I meant. And I'm completely on board and agree with you. There are a lot of sweetheart deals. If you can get a hanger for $150 a month, that at least keeps your aircraft shaded and out of the heat, that's a no-brainer. That's why I used the word affordable, and that's what I was talking about, just financially, looking at these things as a ongoing concern.
Absolutely, Peter. Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you're not going to find a commercial person that will go build a set of 5 or 10 or 15 units of T hangers and try and rent them out. It's just not with construction as it stands today.
Yeah.
You're just not going to be able to find it.
But you take a look at your program and what we were meaning there with a reduction in the capitalization. If the state has a $300,000 grant, and with AIP, you certainly can't amateurize that. But if the full get of the hangar is $1 million and the state's putting in $300,000, you're getting a lot closer to closing that gap to something someone can afford. And I applaud you for that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to kick this over to Jim, because Jim, I know that in Texas and your program with non-primary entitlement and being able to bank that for essentially for 4 years, 5 years ago, that probably would have gotten us a 10-unit T hanger at a 90-10 split, which is very easy for the airport to amortize and start seeing payback on that. That is not the case today with construction prices being what they are. Do you have any additional input on this question?
Yeah, so we're in a pretty unique predicament in that we have more based aircraft here in Texas than any other state. We also have more airports, so those based aircraft are spread throughout a lot of airports. But we're seeing, and Craig, this, we're seeing T hangars coming in at $200,000 to $250,000 a unit. And if you're looking at only being able to spend NPE, you're getting 3 if you're lucky for your NPE for your $600,000. Our state program, we don't combine state funds. We have very minimal state funds that we reserve for non-NIPIAS airports. So that's not an opportunity for us to supplement federal funds with some of our state funds. So if you're looking at moving the needle on based aircraft at the local level, 2 or 3 T hanger units isn't going to really move the needle. So now the airport's coming out of pocket, $250,000 per. So yes, I agree that $100 per month is not going to make that a viable financial investment for an airport. But I think airports do need to have some conversations with themselves about looking at the realities of what they charge. We've taken a look around the state and compared airport lease rates, T hanger rates, to self-storage off airport property in the same town or city. And we're seeing that a T hanger goes for about 1/5 of the cost per square foot as self-storage. So yeah, no wonder people are taking their personal items and storing them in their hangars, because it's 1/5 of the cost than going out to U-Store and getting a 15 by 15 climate controlled storage thing there. So if it's cheaper or more expensive, I should say, to store your college yearbook, your mother's pots and pans, or whatever it might be, than it is your $900,000 Cirrus, well, that doesn't exactly make sense to me. And I think that's something at the local level for airports to really be taking a look at. The other thing is going through the state. Obviously, we're the pass-through agency for FAA funds. But anytime you're going through a government entity, we have a lot of fiery hoops that a contractor has to jump through, and that's going to make things more expensive. We see a very reduced, and Craig, I'm sure with your clients throughout the state, airports see a very reduced cost per unit when they do it on their own, as opposed to going through us. And that's because there are a lot of requirements. I know we have a Buy American question, a few, and I can't wait to get to that one. But that's one of the things. Buy American increases the costs of a lot of things. So that's another consideration, is that an airport could get a lot of bang for their buck doing it on their own.
Thank you, Jim. And Jane or Brad, any additional?
New Mexico, of course, is a little bit different because that's how we roll, where we actually, unlike Texas, don't have the based aircraft, but with all the 100% money that came through FAA in 2019 and 2020 and 2021, we had actually an influx of money that we were able to do hangars at airports across the state, whether they be T hangars or conventional hangars. And the issue is now is the construction cost. So we actually covered those hangars 90%. Not a whole lot of airports participated in it, but we covered them 90%. But now the construction cost is so high that we're going to have to figure out how do we make it so they can actually build them. So.
Okay, thank you. And Brad, anything additional?
Yeah, we're dealing with something similar to New Mexico and Louisiana, where we've had a very successful program that we started 10 years ago, funding hangars at airports and things of that nature. And obviously, with the past 5 years with the pandemic and everything that we've been dealing with in our state, hurricanes and things of that nature, a lot of our construction costs have increased as well. We're starting to see a slowdown there. So that, tie that back into AIP and bill funding. What we try and do is our team really tries to work with the FAA to use airport entitlements, state apportionment funding for the FAA's higher priority type projects, taking care of runways, taxiways, and then the state can essentially come in and we can supplement that funding program with our $28 million to try and get more vertical type infrastructure constructed across the state. The last, and I think Jim hit this point earlier, when you're talking about potential private investment, I don't think we've seen any private investment in hangars in Louisiana for the better part of probably 17 years. I think that was the last nested 10 unit T hangar that I've seen built in our state from a private investment. So at that time, over the next 5 years, we had to try and identify with our airport system, what sort of fix is there to that? Because with the airport's FAA grant assurances and then with the state grant assurances, obviously we want to try and get as many of our airports to be as self-sustainable as possible. Well, the only way to get there is to be able to put in fuel systems, hangars, terminal buildings that allow the airports to rent out and to lease out those kind of areas. But when you start talking about statewide rates and charges and fair market value and return on investment, return on investment can be specific to one individual airport and what they feel is a good benefit cost or return on investment to them. And unfortunately, that looks like $150 a month rent for hangars, which, I don't care if you're a private investor or the state investing in that, you're just not ever going to recoup that cost. So the best you can hope for is to ensure that that money at the local level is flowing back into the airport to be able to be used for maintenance of infrastructure and things of that nature. So again, very similar to the other states, but we have that little bit of caveat there for us.
No questions on the chat, Craig.
All right, well, very good. I'm going to move to the next question, but honestly, it's very related to the topic we're having about hangars. And Jane, I'm going to ask you to take this one first. This came out of the South Central Chapter Conference, the GA committee meeting, where we were sitting around and having a conversation. And it came up related to the funding of pavements associated with hangars. And so the AIP handbook spells out grant eligibility of airport improvement projects in an era where some federal and state funds are now being used for revenue generating projects. Just trying to get some clarification on what is eligible and what is not eligible, and specifically related to the eligibility of taxiways, taxi lanes, and hangar access aprons for airport-owned hangars and those hangars built by a private entity on ground lease. And so I'd like to share my screen and put up a couple of exhibits to help with that discussion. So I'll step through that, Jane, and then if you can jump in and I'd really like to know what your interpretation of eligibility is for some pavement areas, okay?
Absolutely. In New Mexico, everything's eligible. Just kidding. I'll wait till the exhibit gets up. Craig.
I'm trying to get it up
There we
and
go.
did that pop up? So
Yeah.
So essentially what we're looking at is a conceptual hangar development plan for an airport here in Texas. They've got kind of an irregular triangular development area here. The white is existing pavement and the grays are existing hangars. The green and the blues are conceptual proposed pavement and proposed hangars. So I want to focus in right in this area right here, an area of proposed development. We have taxiway Echo. And hopefully my pointer is showing up. Taxiway Echo that leads to a taxi lane. And then we're looking at hangar development on either side of that. So to the bottom are airport developed hangars. And to the top are private developed hangars on a ground lease. So the airport still owns the property, but the hangars are being built by a private entity, 30-year lease per se, private investment. And so walking through taxiway, the construction of taxiway Echo, taxi lane, which is designated by A, apron pavement C, and apron pavement B. How would you interpret the handbook on eligibility of those pavements?
Well, the first question, obviously taxiway Echo would be eligible in my world. The first question I would ask my airport on the private development on ground lease is where the lease line ends, because we would not participate in anything that's within someone else's lease line. So that would be my first question to them. But from the state of New Mexico perspective, all of this, depending on where the lease line is, would be eligible, at least for state funding. I think we might have to do some convincing with FAA on getting FAA funding, but on state funding, this would be eligible.
Okay, well, let's take that. Let's say that the lease line ends, they've got some parking space in front of their hangar. So it essentially ends at the dotted line for Charlie here. So what you're saying is that if the lease line is all the way out to the dash line, you would not support or participate in the pavement up to the hangar.
Correct.
And
Correct.
if the lease line was the face of the hangar,
Then we
you
would participate.
with
Yeah.
state funds, but it may be different on the federal side.
It may be different, but with state funds, definitely. But knowing that those private developers, if we are participating, that is public use pavement. So
Correct.
I can taxi down there and go visit or whatever, but it's public use pavement. We actually had some issues at an airport here where the lease line was to the center line of the taxi lane. So when they asked us to participate, we're like, you need to redo your lease lines because that's not public use pavements. But that's how we break it out here is if we are putting state funds into it, it is public use pavement.
Okay, very good. I appreciate the explanation. And I guess, Brad, do you see it differently in your state?
No, actually, we do it the exact same way here in Louisiana, just like New Mexico and like Jane explained it. So we would look at where that lease line runs, and any pavements that the state of Louisiana invests in is considered public use after the fact. So we would do it exactly the same.
Okay, Grayson.
So in Oklahoma, we follow what I believe is the AIP handbook ruling, which would be that if these are, A is eligible, B is eligible, but under a different category code, C would not be eligible. So obviously for state funds, we don't have different category codes, but what we've seen in Oklahoma from an FAA perspective is that A would be considered taxi lane funding, B would have to be under the hangar construction funding code. And then obviously C would not be eligible for AIP funding. So that's kind of that we mirror the same way with OAC state funding. Now I will say, like, for example, let's say we're going to build a taxi lane and we only know that one hangar is going to be built. So let's just say the bottom left hangar is going to be built with airport monies, and we don't really know what the bottom right hangar is going to do. And so we may go build all of B. If there is a private tenant that comes in and wants to build the bottom right hangar, we're not necessarily going to punish them, but we would not go plan to spend all of B if we knew that was a private hangar. But if we just go ahead and we build the hangar, build the taxi lane as it stands today, we build B with public dollars, and then 5 years from now, private entity wants to come in and build a hangar, they're not going to get punished and say, no, you got to wait for a public hangar to be built there.
Okay. And if it's a private use hangar, construction funds, maintenance funds, whether it's a rehabilitation, those would not apply either, right? You would not spend money to maintain the pavement in front of a private hangar per se.
That's accurate.
Okay, all right. Very good. And we may have some questions that are coming up in the chat, but I'll pitch it over to Jim and see if Jim has similar interpretations.
Yeah, so because you said this was a Texas airport, I'm answering theoretically, and this is not a committal to funding anything at one of your client airports, Craig. So just for the record, since it's being recorded.
That's fair.
So obviously, to echo is good. Alpha, what we would look at is what is the taxi lane width requirement for the critical aircraft. We would then look at that and then apply the 50-foot eligibility from the building and see if they match up or if there's overlap. And that's how we'd make the decision on that. Obviously, C, I think we all agree that the hangars above C and the pavement in front of it, that's going to be ineligible. That's exclusive use. We'd also look at the lease for the hangars below B. If it's common use facilities, that's one thing. But if there's, we have had situations with airports where there were hangar developments that were essentially leased exclusive use rights to common use airport owned hangars, making them exclusive use, not for the public benefit. So we take that into account as well. So we don't have enough money to fund all the pavement we would like to. So we have to be a little more scrupulous. Another important thing we would look at in a situation with Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie is if, let's say, we determine that Alpha is needed at 25 feet wide, and that doesn't cover all of the pavement out there. As you know, as an engineer, good pavement can be infected by bad pavement. So we wouldn't want to rehab or reconstruct a taxi lane while allowing really old, bad pavement to abut it. So one of the things we talk to our sponsors early and often about is they are responsible for 100% of the pavement costs for the ineligible, because we don't want to put good pavement next to bad pavement. That's really important for us to make sure that we're not setting our new pavement up for failure, because that failing pavement to the sides will creep into, just like a tumor, creep into our good pavement. So that's a conversation we have with our sponsors.
Okay.
Hey, Jim, I actually have a follow-up question to that. Sorry. So you hold your airports responsible. So you'll do A, but they'll be responsible for C. If that C pavement is in truly bad condition, do you allow essentially, like if they're going to be bidding out Alpha to do an additive vault that the sponsor pays for independently as part of the construction contract?
Yeah, or we just line item that at 100%
Okay.
local. Yep.
Okay. Just curious. Thank you.
And so let's say Alpha, the eligible part of Alpha overlapped ineligible Charlie. We give the eligibility trumps the ineligibility on that. If you see that, Craig, we run into overlapping, the 50 feet in front of the building overlaps the 25 feet of the taxi lane. Well, if the eligible trumps the ineligible, we give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, the airport gets the benefit in that situation.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and I was just more asking for constructability wise, because I know Texas is huge. In my state, we only have probably 6 contractors that can do airport work, and they also do highway work. So it would be difficult to bid out just the C portion, and I'd get a better price if we did it additive vault. So that's why I was asking.
Oh yeah, no, we'd include it in our project and just line item it as 100% local.
Awesome.
Craig, we have a question.
All right, if you would go ahead, Peter.
This is from my friends at Brownville. Is the good/bad pavement policy written anywhere?
We're working on our policies. Yeah, it's something we are individually on a case-by-case basis working with, and we're in the process of updating our policies and standards.
And just one point of clarification, I'm pretty sure I understand, but Jim, the C area, it doesn't matter where the lease line is, whether it's on the dash line or it's the face of the hangar. If this is a private hangar, private funded hangar per se, that pavement is not eligible, correct? State funds.
Yeah, I mean, if it's essentially exclusive use, that we apply that 50-foot, if the lease line did go beyond the 50 feet and that exclusive use area extended beyond 50 feet, then obviously that ineligible line would move a little bit as well.
Okay, all right, very good. Anything else on the chat, Peter?
That's all right now, Craig.
Well, I'm going to try and escape out of this and move on. So,
And just as a housekeeping matter, we've got 18 minutes. We're doing well.
okay. I have some additional hangar related stuff, but I think I'm gonna skip some of that because we've got to spend quite a bit of time on that. Jim, there was
Got
one
another
item that,
question, Craig. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You
oh,
want
go
me
ahead,
to
please.
go ahead? Okay. Would you also break out the prorated cost of data collection / design for the X% of the pavement that is in the area of C?
So I think to that question, if you're going to design that pavement, all of it, the A, B, and C, you want to do one integral design so that you're considering you're meeting FAA standards in terms of slopes. You're setting some finished floor elevations for the hangars that are above floodplain or that it'll drain. And so I think the question is the design of that ineligible pavement, would the design cost be broken out as ineligible as well?
Panelists?
I mean, I'm sorry, AIP handbook clearly says anything related to an ineligible project is ineligible. So that's our stance, is that anything, you can't do pay for environmental with FAA funds for an ineligible project. So we attach a project's eligibility to everything in advance of construction, design, environmental, land acquisition.
And so, Jim, you're generally applying the same standard with the AIP funds from the handbook as you are for your state funds. It's all of that cost is essentially ineligible.
Correct.
Okay. And so I think, Grayson, you had kind of indicated the same, that y'all apply your funds similar to the handbook, and would that apply to design as well, or environmental with that ineligible?
Correct. So basically, we would probably wait to get a cost of the pavement and just divvy out based on cost. So if we knew what the cost of A would be and the percentage of that, let's say it's 60%, and the cost of C is 40%, then obviously we'll just split the design cost, 60% being eligible, 40% being ineligible, or whatever the percentage ends up being on the cost after we receive bids on the project.
Okay, very good. And I think Jane and Brad, y'all had a similar stance in terms of, at least with the funds that y'all control on the state side, that pavement Charlie potentially eligible. So therefore, I'm assuming that the non-construction costs will be treated the same way.
In my state it would. It's just too difficult to split out that small portion of design cost, or forcing, hey, you need to hire this engineer to do the design. So in our state, we would just cover it.
Okay.
So everyone come to New Mexico.
Yeah, same in Louisiana, Craig. Yes, sir.
Okay, well, very good. Anything else on chat related to this topic, Peter?
No, sir.
All right. Well, given our time, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. This was a topic that Jim had expressed some interest in when I sent out the questions. And so, Jim, I'm going to ask if you could tackle this one first. It's there appears to be renewed emphasis on Buy American by the FAA, the Buy American clause that's in construction contracts, including further documentation of that, as well as the introduction of Buy America with the BIL funding. And so what are you seeing with regards to the inclusion of Buy America into construction contracts? What new requirements, if any, are you implementing during construction? And I think bigger picture, do you foresee any impact to the cost of construction with the inclusion of Buy America? which essentially eliminates the waivers and requires 100% American materials and manufacturing. And so there's a Buy American with an N at the end that has always been part of our construction documents. And with that, there are some materials that are waived from being manufactured in America. Plus there's like a 60% requirement minimum for that manufacturing, whereas Buy America with no N essentially requires 100% American materials. And so Jim, if you could maybe provide some insight on that and what your expectations are on the construction side in terms of costs.
I expect construction costs to go up, and I expect projects to take longer. We're kind of limiting ourselves a little bit. From a national macroeconomic standpoint, a logistics job pays more than a manufacturing job. So I'm not, I don't think bringing in materials from somewhere else is necessarily the worst thing. If we were to be able to be a little more lenient with some of the supplies, and I know that's one of the reasons we see a lot of, especially vertical construction, being cheaper when an airport does it on their own. It's because they don't have some of these requirements such as this. So, I think the initial gut reaction that we have is that all of this is going to result in higher construction prices and in projects taking longer to complete, if they get completed at all, because the construction prices might be prohibitively high. So that's really one of our biggest concerns in a state with very, very limited federal and state funding, for us to be as resourceful as possible. That is our main priority in terms of how we spend our money, is making sure we are being as resourceful as possible. And honestly, that this is, this cuts our hamstring a little bit. It hurts us a little bit to be able to stretch our dollars out as far as possible. But it's the requirement. We will abide by it. We have to, but it does limit the ability of our dollar to go as far as it could otherwise.
And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a moratorium on this until November of 2022, I believe. So there is some ramp up leeway period is my understanding. Is that correct? And I see Jane shaking her head.
Yeah, there's a waiver. I think it's October or November of this year. And we're like, Jim, we're just expecting prices to skyrocket even more than they are now when the waiver isn't in place. And we are anxiously awaiting guidance, if we get any, from headquarters on how to implement this.
Hey,
Yeah.
Craig,
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
aren't there certification requirements now with Buy America that the AE industry is going to have to deal with in terms of certifying materials from wherever they may be produced?
Well, and I know that in Texas, they have started to roll that out. We're starting to see that on some construction contracts where, like I said, there's just more of an emphasis on certifying that it's Buy American or Buy America. Ultimately, it's a construction contract with a contractor, and the contractor's responsible for meeting their contract. But at the same time, how much oversight can we apply to that as state agency or as a consultant in terms of and the word certify has been used, which is really challenging for anybody but the manufacturer to certify it, because you don't have the chain of command. If you're assembling an edge light fixture, it's impossible to know where all those components come from that are manufactured into that component. So, ultimately, the responsibility is the contractors. It's in their contract. And then I think as we as state agencies and consultants, we have to do what is within our power in terms of having them certify it, approving a submittal, and when materials are delivered to the site, that we're checking the submittal against what's delivered. And I think that is what's within our control, and not assuming responsibility for a contractor.
Well, so then that means not only our contractor price is going to be higher, but my inspector prices are going to be higher, because from my standpoint, the contract is between the sponsor and the contractor. And you at KSA are going to be the ones who are inspecting it, I'm assuming. And so then those prices are going to go up even more because I'm going to put the burden on you guys to provide that to the state, to the FAA.
And I'll just go ahead and advance bill you now, Jane, on that.
But Texas has a waiver on that increased fee, right, Craig, from KSA?
Let's see if Brad or Grayson have anything to add on this topic, maybe if they're hearing something different.
I'm hearing pretty much what you all are hearing, increased costs, particularly in the vertical construction market. I think this is one of those interesting policies that I get why we as America are trying to do it. And I think it's a sound economic policy from the perspective of, yeah, we need to kind of come back to home. But it's almost like the challenge we have every day. I mean, we see it, especially in small towns, is buy local. And so do I go to Walmart and buy, my paper towels for $2 a roll, or do I buy local and buy it for $2.50 a roll? And so that's just, it's almost like this is a microcosm of the grander debate that we're having in America. And I support the overall idea behind it, but it is a challenge for us, for those of us that are in the infrastructure game, of how do we go about funding that without getting too far outside of our abilities to actually maintain what we have in the system. I don't know what the solution is, and I hate bringing these ideas to the table without solutions, but I think there's going to have to be a happy medium where we have a Buy American because it's good for the country, but yet not have a project that 2 years ago is now costing double or triple what it's going to cost in the future. So.
Yeah. And I think, with Buy American, with the N at the end, there are products that are waived. I mean, there is a waiver list that is extremely long. And so, there are products that do not have to be 100% American made and manufactured. And that's already established and in place, but adding Buy America with 100% and the industry not necessarily being ramped up to produce all of that, like I'll say, is it's going to increase costs. And I think, Jim, what you said at the very beginning, it's going to increase the time of construction as well, because there's going to be much longer lead times to get these materials. So
I think another interesting thing is, and I'm actually very excited about our potential new FAA administrator coming from the transit world, because I think the FAA's micro purchase waiver on Buy American is $2,500. Do you know what it is for transit? It's $250,000. So that's an AWAS, there's a lot that can be done with 250 grand waiver on a Buy American. So I don't know, maybe our new transit heavy FAA administrator is going to be able to maybe pull some larger micro purchase waivers for Buy American over to our side. So,
okay. Any additional discussion? I know that we're coming up against our 1 hour. I have several more questions, but I'm gonna ask one more and throw that out there, and then we'll probably call our time good unless we have something on chat. So, Brad, I'm hoping you can tackle this one first. So many times airports are approached by developers who want to own the land and not enter a ground lease. So, they're hesitant to spend the money on the infrastructure when they don't own the land as part of a ground lease. They'd much rather own the land that their money is being invested into. So that takes us into what would be a through the fence operation. What is your state's general position on that? Or is that something you encourage, discourage? Is it looked at on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, so right now, that's a great question, Craig. Right now, our state law allows through the fence operations in Louisiana. When I took over when I came on board back in 2001, we only had 2 instances of through the fence operations. I have public airports in Louisiana, and from a policy standpoint, we have to be very careful because the state law allows it. But from a policy standpoint, and trying to stay more in line with what the FAA guidance is and the FAA grant assurances have, obviously we discourage that practice to the best of our ability. But we're walking a very fine line here, and we know that I think it was about 10 years ago That was a big item in Congress, and there were some congressional hearings, on through the fence as well, because you have a lot of fly-in type communities, especially out in the western part of the United States, Montana and Idaho, which are extremely successful. Down here in Louisiana, we just don't have that many. We've had a couple of false starts on airport fly-in communities simply because of that state law that they wanted to start building that, but they wanted public funds to do so. And so that got real muddy, real quick. But from just a policy standpoint, we do try and discourage that effort and stay away from it as much as we can.
Okay, very good. Appreciate that. How about New Mexico, Jane?
This is why Brad and I are ADOs together, because we're exactly the same, except he has a much larger budget than I do. There's only one airport in the state of New Mexico that has a through the fence operation, and that was grandfathered in. If our airports come to us asking for a through the fence operation, we highly discourage it. However, we would work with them on getting everything they need if they really, really, really pushed it. So,
Okay. Grayson.
I'd probably say something similar in Oklahoma. We've never seen a through the fence agreement go successfully. There's always operational challenges, control challenges. One of the things that we try and tell our airports is, when a business comes to you and says, hey, I want to own the land, we have never seen, when you really boil down the weeds, we've never seen a legal case of funding mechanisms, ownership, control, job responsibilities, you name it, that requires them to own the land. It's personal preference. And so at the end of the day, kind of what we tell the airport is, look, you're going to be losing money at the end of the day with through the fence. I said, if you go leasing the property over the long haul, over 50, 100 years, it's going to be a little bit more beneficial for you all to lease land. And so we kind of discourage it, as you've heard the two predecessors of mine mention. But we do have it in probably about a half dozen, maybe 10 cases across the state. And it's worked from time to time. But for the most part, 70 or 80% of the time, we have control issues, and usually ends up being we hear complaints about a through the fence operation because of what a predecessor had done at that particular airport, and kind of gave that through the fence operator the world. And it just never has worked out from a control standpoint. I think it can if it's written the right way and treated the right way, but that's a pretty big if in all of our lives.
Very good. Thank you, Grayson. And Jim, final comments.
I mean, I think Grayson's last comment nails it. It's write it the right way, do it right. We, as a block grant state, we also handle compliance for the FAA for the non-primary airports, and through the fence plays heavily into that. And we encourage all of our airports to get with us early and make sure we have the ability to review the through the fence agreement if it's for a new agreement, because some of those old ones are pretty rough. Those agreements are not the greatest agreements ever, but moving forward, just saying, okay, water under the bridge, any new proposal, or if you have a poorly written and executed existing through the fence agreement, when that comes up for renewal, let's all work together and do that. And another thing is, and we do have a lot of through the fence, that, Craig, we have a ton of through the fence, is for us to serve as the lead on helping airports educate those through the fence users, and also helping the local sponsor understand that they need to still be charging, a fair access for that airport, because they are having access to what Grayson accurately said is a state and federally subsidized, investment infrastructure. So that's really the key. Charge the right amount, make sure the agreement isn't putting the airport in a difficult or non-compliant position, and letting us as the state and the compliance lead for the FAA review it and make sure it's everything it needs to be.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that. Peter, do we have anything on chat?
Nothing on chat, Craig. You're clean.
All right, excellent. So we've done a sufficient job of covering the topics here. We are at our hour, and so we'll go ahead and close it. I really want to thank our panelists. We really appreciate y'all taking the time. We had great participation today, a lot of valuable information, and I just can't thank y'all enough for being part of our panel today. So, and want to thank the chapter as well for putting this on, hosting this. I think it's greatly beneficial to our aviation community. So thank y'all very much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys. Have a
Craig.
good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Stay awesome. Bye.